Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Beef Upfront podcast. Back to our normal weekly showing after my hiatus last week. Joe, thanks for filling in and carrying on the show as always. Before we get into week 10 already, can't believe it, as I always say. You want to kind of just recap last week and go over some of the stuff as I wasn't on the show last week?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for letting me host because you and Sean could have easily pulled the plug on that. Had a lot of fun doing it. I know the guys had a lot of fun doing beef as well. I thought it was a good show. I'm glad to have you back. Of course, though, beef is back in the world is back to its natural order. But last week I went 11-5-1. Didn't look at the other guys' records. I won't lie. I know my brother went 5-0 straight up because he was the only one that picked Kansas State. Shout out him because we were all way off with Oklahoma State. But I'm 4-1 against or 4-1 over under, 4-1 outright for me, 3-1-1 against the spread. My best bet lost after I was riding a 3-game win streak, and my upset pick of Nebraska did not hit. Illinois, I got to give them credit there, a lot better than I thought.
All right. Well, another good week from you, Joe. No surprise. I lost track of the season standings, but you're well ahead of me right now. Let's see if I can kind of come back and finish the season strong. Another 5 games to break down this week, and then we got our best bets and our upset special as well. This week we started off on Friday night. We're recording this on Tuesday. Started action, so that's some exciting stuff. More football all week. I think I saw for the next 30 days or something. There's a football game at least every night. And then we have college basketball starting up as well. But we start Friday night for college football this week. We go to the Pac-12, number 24 Oregon State at Washington. I believe this is the second time this year Washington has been on a Friday night. They had that UCLA game earlier in the year that we broke down. 10:30 on ESPN2. Washington minus 4.5 over under 60 here.
This game's going to be so much fun to bet on because I already know I'm going to. I'm thinking Oregon State here on the spread to be pulling off the upset 27-24. Shout out the Beavers, though. First time ranked in the AP poll, I believe, since 2014, maybe 2013. It's been a while. They're having a solid season. Granted, they haven't exactly beaten the strongest of opponents, but I've got to show love to the Beavers. They've kind of been one of the worst Power 5 teams over the last decade, but no one really talks about them just because they've been out in the Pac-12 and they've been so, irrelevant. When you're irrelevant in an already irrelevant conference, not a great recipe for success. But this is something you can build upon. This is a huge marquee game. Going to be a lot of people watching on Friday night because there's not going to be a lot of sports on starting at 10:30. Some Pac-12 after dark. Got to love it. I got a feeling this game is going to be hectic. I saw on Twitter right as I was making the pick, actually, there's some weather system going through there, but they're saying 40-mile-an-hour winds and rain. So I'm hammering the under of 60. I'm taking Oregon State to cover plus 4.5. Michael Penix had a good start to the year. He's still having a decent year, but I don't know. It's not like the Michael Penix we saw in the first half of the year. Tough to buy him long term because I still have that memories of him in Indiana last year, just how bad he was. So give me the Beavs here, 27-24.
I'm going to take Washington. I got them 31-27. So I'm going to take Oregon State to cover 4.5 under 60. Pretty fun game to kick off the slate. It's another one of those, didn't expect this game to be making the show at all. So it's cool to have this matchup on here. Both teams, looking at the standings, are pretty big long shots right now to make the Pac-12 title game. But if they win out, they have the chance. But the loser of this one's pretty much done, as they both already have 2 losses in the conference. But with some chaos, if they find a way to win out, especially Oregon State getting the chance to play Oregon down the road as well, both these teams still have a shot at going to the Pac-12 title game. So after being a joke, though, for most of the past decade, Oregon State has made themselves into a pretty respectable program. And they've really built an identity of physicalness, toughness up front. And that's what they're going to beat you. Washington, though, usually has a defensive identity, but this year they really adopted a pass-first kind of air raid type team. Penix is leading the nation in passing yards. But like you said, after really starting out hot, they've kind of faltered a little bit as they've started to play some better opponents. They had that win over Michigan State at the beginning of the year, but now we're looking at Michigan State, I believe, sitting at 3-5. So not a very good win, which at the time it looked like a very impressive victory. This Washington offense puts up 40 points per game, though. But like you said, Joe, with the weather, I could see a bit of a more low-scoring game. Oregon State has beat up on inferior opponents as well, though, this year and have faltered against the better teams like USC and Utah. I think Washington's more of a better program right now, at least, and just a more talented overall team. So that's why I'm going to take them in this one. I don't think the Beavers have enough firepower to keep up with Washington in this one, especially going on the road here. But if the weather does play a factor in Penix and that Washington offense aren't able to throw the ball all around the yard and this game's uglier, this could definitely favor Oregon State. But for the time being, I'll go Washington straight up, but Oregon State covering that 4.5. Second game of the week, best game of the year, you think, Joe? Number 2, Tennessee at number 1, Georgia, 3:30, CBS, Georgia -9, over under 65.5. And I was very surprised to see this. First time number 1 and number 2 have met up in the regular season since 2011 when LSU beat Alabama 9-6. But kind of the more I thought about it, like I thought maybe LSU and Alabama might have been 1 and 2 and met up over that stretch, but Clemson's been number 1 a lot, and playing in the ACC, they haven't really had that many great opponents. But I thought Alabama over the course of that time would have had another game against another number 1 or number 2 ranked team. But without much further ado, let's go right into this one. Game of the year, 2 Tennessee at number 1 Georgia. What do you got?
I have Tennessee winning this game by 11 points, 45-34. I know that might sound crazy saying that out loud, but I mean, you look at Georgia, yeah, they're number 1 because they're defending national champs. They smoked Oregon week 1, which, listen, I still think they'd be Oregon now, but this Oregon team we have currently at, today on November 1st is a much different team than that Oregon team Labor Day weekend. It would not be that bad of a blowout if they played again. I still think Georgia would win, but I don't know if they would win by 46 points. Besides that, Georgia's been sleepwalking. They haven't needed to wake up. They had a tight game on the road against Missouri, but nothing really happened there. Even like last week, playing in what's supposed to be a big rivalry game against Florida. Florida isn't even in the same planet as Georgia. Like, the Bulldogs have been able to sleepwalk. Tennessee already has massive wins at Pitt, which, yes, Pitt isn't as good now, but still at Pitt early in the season, that was a big win. You have a big win against Alabama, the biggest win of the season. The win that, even if they lose this game and win out, could probably still sneak them into the playoff. And you just smoked Kentucky on national TV at home. It's not like it was a close game. They obliterated Kentucky, made Will Levis look like me. Crazy. Hendon Hooker if he has even a decent game and Tennessee wins, he basically cements the Heisman, and he's going to win it this year. And that being said, I'm blanking on the name. I was at work all day. I saw one of their best edge rushers for Georgia is out for the season. He won't be playing, which is going to be big for that defense. But listen, Tennessee isn't Kent State. Tennessee isn't Missouri. Tennessee isn't Vanderbilt. This Tennessee offense can score. This is probably the most prolific offense that Georgia's defense has played in the past 2 years. I think this Tennessee offense is just as good, maybe even a little bit better than Bama's of last year. But that being said, all that, give me the Vols, and I think they're going to win. A lot of parallels to the 2019 LSU team. That's all I'm going to say.
I like Tennessee to win this one as well. So obviously +9, and I got over 65.5 hitting here. Tennessee 37, Georgia 34. There's certainly a path still, I think, where we could see both of these teams in the playoff again. I think there's even a path where we see 3 SEC teams. Hopefully not, but it definitely could shake out that way at the end. I think this game comes down to, though, it's pretty simple. Which Georgia team shows up? Tennessee has been awesome all year, and they've been consistently awesome. Like, they're going to go up there and put points up and throw the ball all around the yard. Georgia, as we know, a defensive program. They have that defensive identity. They want to win with that, and then they want to hit some explosive plays. Stetson Bennett can, drive you down the field methodically, but a lot of their big offensive performances come with big offensive explosive plays, hitting the tight ends and hitting the backs. They kind of been thriving this year off of getting those big explosive plays. And when those aren't hitting, that's when we see games like the Missouri game, the Kent State game, where teams are able to keep it close. I mean, but really, how good is Georgia? Do they deserve to be number 1? I think tonight when the rankings come out, I think they might have Tennessee as number 1 for the playoff rankings when those first come out tonight. But I mean, after that Georgia game, that Oregon game at the beginning of the year that you touched on, they haven't really played much since. I mean, they struggled against Kent State, Missouri, and then Tennessee has been tested week after week. They've knocked off 5 ranked teams this season, and they just have like a special like swagger to them. I think playing super confident. I think they just find a way to get the job done yet again. I don't think Stetson Bennett can go score for score with this Vols offense like Bryce Young could, being able to keep that one close. So I think the Vols win this one in a classic and continue to have a historic season. So give me 37-34 Tennessee. So Tennessee plus a 9 and over 65.5. Third game of the week, number 6, Alabama. Another really good SEC matchup here at number 15, LSU. 7 o'clock on ESPN. Alabama minus 13, over under 58. It'll be great having these two games go back to each other.
Yeah, I have LSU pulling off the upset. I think I'm telling you, this is going to be a week. I thought it was going to be last week. It didn't happen. There's going to be upsets because we haven't had a true weekend yet of where, you'll see like a ton of upsets happen. Like I know on paper, Notre Dame beating Syracuse was a big upset. You had some of those upsets. Louisville beating Wake Forest, but nothing like this. I think LSU is going to win this game at home 30-28. So I'm going to obviously take LSU plus the 13. I'm realizing that I'm pushing. So let's say 31-28. I'll take the over. Realize that added up to 58. That being said, though, something seems off with this Alabama team. I don't know what it is. And don't get me wrong, they could still win this game easily and still probably go 11-1 to the SEC title game. But I don't know. This Alabama team doesn't feel as dominant as Alabama teams have in the past. Like Tennessee was just a better football team that made mistakes and barely got out alive. Alabama barely got out alive against Texas, barely got out alive against A&M. This is a team, an LSU program that is hungry, that has been the last 2 years not that good. They went 5-5 in the regular season, the COVID year, and then 6-6 in 2021 after that national title game. You have Brian Kelly. This is why you paid Brian Kelly all that money. Brian Kelly, you think he likes watching Saban? Notre Dame, he's gotten his ass kicked by Saban 2012 national title game. He lost in the playoff during the COVID year. It got smoked by Alabama. Trust me, I'm a Notre Dame fan. It sucked. Brian Kelly wants to absolutely obliterate Saban. I think LSU is going to have a huge game. Night game at Death Valley is an atmosphere like nowhere else. I know it's been said a million times. Give me the Tigers here, and you don't get rich betting against Saban, but I'm going to do it anyways.
I agree with you, Joe. I think this week we're going to see a lot of chaos, but I don't think we see it in this game. I think Alabama handles their business in this one, 38-31. But so LSU covers that 13-point spread, over 58 hits. But first, before I get into my kind of breakdown of the game, props to LSU really turning their season around. I mean, you knew Brian Kelly was going to get this program rolling, and I expect them to be in playoff contention as soon as next year. But I just don't think they're ready for kind of this moment yet. They're still transitioning to this phase. Like you said, Nick Saban owns Brian Kelly. So, until it's one of those things, until proven otherwise, I think you have to go with the side of Alabama here. The spread is a big number, but over the past 2 games LSU's played, they were off last week. But I think you can argue after that, like Tennessee loss that LSU had, Tennessee and LSU have been like the 2 most impressive teams in the country over these past few weeks. They put up 45 points in back-to-back games. I just don't think they're good enough, though, to win this one, but I do like them to keep it close and have this one be a dogfight, especially with it being at home. Bama knows, Nick Saban knows, the whole staff knows they can't lose again and be a playoff team. So this is a desperate kind of Alabama team, and I feel like a desperate Bama team is the worst one to play against. Both teams are coming off a bye here, which, shouldn't really give either team much of an edge, but like I was saying, Nick Saban getting some extra time over Brian Kelly still gives you just that maybe little extra kick to go on the road and get a win here. I expect this one to be high scoring, and I like the over a lot. In his last 2 games, Jaden Daniels for LSU has really taken off, completed 71% of his passes in both of his games, and has thrown for 597 yards and 5 touchdowns. So he's really opened up this LSU offense, giving him a different element. Also taking great care of the ball this season. Only 1 interception all year. If he continues that play and takes care of the ball, especially being a night game at home here, they have a real shot in this one. I just think Bryce Young is going to outduel him in the end, and Bama finds just a way to win. It's going to be one of those weird games where Bama just gets that lucky bounce down the stretch, and we're like, oh, wow, of course that would happen to Alabama. And just that's the way this game kind of comes to fruition. But I like Alabama 38-31, LSU plus 13. Keep it close throughout, over 58 hits. Fourth game of the week, we go to South Bend, number 5, Clemson at Notre Dame, 7:30 on NBC. Clemson minus 3.5, over under 47.5.
This is one of those games where it's like there's a reason why I'm bad at gambling. And it's like, well, this is one of the games I'm looking like, how is Clemson only a 3.5 point favorite over Notre Dame? A team that has lost to Stanford, who is terrible. A team who has lost to Marshall, who is terrible. Ohio State, obviously, we lost too, but still, yeah, I get it. Good win against Syracuse last week. We looked that's probably the best game I've seen this team play all year. But Clemson is there's a reason why Clemson is as good as they have been over the years. They're one of the best programs in the country. They're sitting at number 5, and they're coming off a bye week where you can win and lose a bye week. They lost the bye week because all of the good teams that they played against, their Syracuse win got exposed from Notre Dame. Wake Forest got in, who we're going to get to in a minute because they're playing a game against NC State. Wake Forest got destroyed by Louisville. 6 turnovers in 1 quarter. NC State has lost their quarterback. So now all of a sudden your probably 3 biggest wins are looking not that great right now in terms of in conference. And then a potential ACC title game against North Carolina. North Carolina's only loss was to this Notre Dame team. Notre Dame seems to be able to kick the crap out of anyone in the ACC, but when they play outside the ACC, it's a disaster. That being said, this is a huge opportunity for Clemson to kind of, give themselves a little bit of insurance, especially now with the playoff rankings coming out in about an hour from now. It's almost 6 o'clock as we're recording. Clemson knows they have to go undefeated if they want to make the playoff. 1 loss for Clemson, they're done. The SEC is just 1,000 times better of a conference. I think DJ is going to have a good game after getting benched against Syracuse, had the bye week to kind of prepare for this Notre Dame team. But I will say, this is the last thing I'll say about this game. If Notre Dame wins this game, this will be one of the most frustrating seasons continuing out of all my sports because of the Mets sucking, the Jets now, Zach Wilson looks like, Luke playing quarterback, and if Notre Dame beats Clemson but has losses to Marshall and Stanford on their schedule, like I'm going to lose my mind. Like 3 or 4 plays total go differently in those 2 games. Notre Dame has 1 loss and is potentially a top 10 team. Like it's sickening to me. If Notre Dame wins this game, don't get me wrong, I'll be very excited, but I'll also be like, damn, this is going to be one of the most wasted seasons that I can remember. I think Notre Dame is a year away. I was out on Freeman earlier. I'm kind of buying back in. That being said, though, I mean, Clemson is a different animal. If Stanford and Marshall could come into Notre Dame Stadium and have their way with you, there's no reason why this Clemson front 7 shouldn't be able to dominate you.
All right. Well, I said I'm not going to have chaos ensue in that LSU game, but I am going to have it ensue here. I'm going to go Notre Dame, not just to cover, but to win outright here. I got them 24-20. This would be a pretty big upset, I think. I feel like it'll get more hyped up, like to the outside world as an upset, but like just looking at the spread, like only 3.5. It's one of those like this line stinks, and I don't think Vegas respects Clemson because they haven't really like given them great lines like throughout most of the year. That you look at Alabama, a 13-point favorite at LSU, and then like Clemson was only like a 10-point favorite last week or 2 weeks ago against Syracuse. Like they haven't really given them much respect, and a lot of the like national media doesn't really respect them either, and thinks they benefit from playing in the soft ACC. But it's kind of one of those things. I'm siding with Vegas here. It seems like they know best. And that's why I'm going to take the Irish at home. This would be that signature victory of the Marcus Freeman era here in year 1. This reminds me of that crazy like rain game back in 2015. I remember watching that in my basement between Deshaun Kaiser and a young Deshaun Watson. That was one of the most like entertaining college football like back and forth games I've seen. So I hope we get like a similar type battle in this one. The offense has gotten rolling recently for Notre Dame, putting up 40 points in back-to-back weeks. And that's thanks to the work they've been putting on the ground. Against Syracuse last week, rushed for 246 yards and 3 touchdowns. Have really found their identity on that side of the ball, imposing their will on the Orange last week. So Clemson, very good rush defense. So like you said, Joe, elite front 7. We touched on it before. Looked at that mock draft, and they had 3 defensive linemen in the top 10 alone. So they're only allowing 87 yards per game on the ground. So this will be a big test, but I think Drew Pine is going to have to make a few plays with his arm in this one to get the victory. Notre Dame's still going to try and rely on that run game, but I think they have to be patient. If they don't get it going early, they still just have to stick with it and hope it comes to help them later in the game. This game being at night is a big benefit too, I think. I don't love this pick, but I'm feeling some upsets this week. I think we do see some chaos. So give me Notre Dame 24, Clemson 20, Notre Dame plus 3.5, under 47.5. Fifth and final game of the week, a bit of a snoozer, but still a rank game. So we got to break it down. We got 20 Wake Forest at 21 NC State, 8 o'clock, ACC Network, Wake Forest -5, over under 54.
Yeah, Coyle, you kind of said it. I've never looked at a battle of ranked before and being like just depressed. Like this is just like this game, a couple weeks ago was like, oh, this is going to be to determine who's going to be in second place in the ACC, in the Atlantic. Maybe if Clemson slips up, who knows what happens. But no, Wake Forest last week goes and gets the doors beaten off of them by Louisville. NC State obviously loses Devin Leary, but they need to come back from down 21-3 against Virginia Tech, and they only win by 1. It's this game had so much like hoopla around it. Now it's kind of just deflated. So give me Wake Forest here, 39-22, because NC State without Devin Leary is just not that good of a football team. And it stinks. And it's also like goes to show you the state of these two programs. A ranked game on ACC Network at 8 o'clock, when at 7:30 on ABC, a game we'll get to in a little bit. At least I will touch on a little bit. Florida State, Miami, two programs who are not that good right now, but because of the rivalry, gets to be on ABC while these are playing as the sideshow in the background, like the ugly stepsister. So, but that being said, though, give me the Deacons. And who knows, if the Deacons win out, all of a sudden they might get that ACC auto bid if Clemson goes to the playoff to the Orange Bowl. So you never know.
Yeah, I don't have that much to say about this one. I like Wake Forest to win 31-17. Wake Forest -5, over 54. Kind of like we touched about, the least exciting game on the list this week, but still a big game that's going to play a lot of influence down the line for the ACC. So Wake was embarrassed by Louisville this past week, and NC State, as you said, Joe, squeaked by a bad Virginia Tech team. Doing a little bit of a deep dive on this game. Last time NC State scored more than 22 points was over a month ago now, September 24th, against your UConn Huskies. They put up 41, but don't sleep on that UConn team. Held BC to, I think, 3 last week. But that's back when they still had Devin Leary. This one is a pretty easy pick for me. I think Wake wins, and they win easily, even with it being on the road. Last week, Wake had 8 turnovers, and they still found a way to score 21 points. One of their touchdowns was like garbage time with like 4 or 5 seconds left, but still, they still found a way to score 21 points after turning the football over 8 times. I think NC State struggles to put up that amount of points, even 21. As I said, they only scored 22 points. Last time they scored more than 22 points was back in September. So as long as they take care of the ball, even if they turn it over like 3 times, I think they'll still have a safe chance to win this one. Should be able to score at least 24 points, and I don't think the Wolfpack can do that. So give me Wake Forest here pretty easily, covering that 5. And then, under 54, hitting 31-17. Now we will get into the best bet. As I always say, the worst bet. We'll never hit one of these again. I've got to go back for next week's show and look at what best bet I actually did hit. But we're going to go over 53 in Conference USA here between UAB and UTSA. Both these teams combined to average 65 a game, combined to allow 47 a game. You average that out, you get 56 a game. Bam, it hits. UTSA, very explosive offense. They've scored 30 points in every game this season except one, and they have 4 games with at least 40 points. So if they're able to just put up a 30 spot like they've done in every single game this year except for one of them, I think UAB can get the other 24 to hit the over. I think the spread in this game was like UTSA -1, so this should be a pretty close game. 30-24, that would kind of be my prediction for UTSA to win. The over hits there, and you're rolling in all the money. So over 53, UAB, UTSA. Hopefully my week off from the show kind of gives me some new life and some power to get this best bet to finally hit.
Real quick, I want to shout out my UConn Huskies that you said it. First win over Boston College and program here last week. the least amount of points they let a Power 5 team score ever with 3. I didn't know that was a thing because UConn was in the Big East. I'm surprised, like for football, they didn't allow 3 or less. All that stuff. They're going to play UMass on Friday night. They're going to beat UMass. Knock on wood if they don't beat UMass. But they'll be 5-5, and with 2 games left, they host Liberty, which they'll lose, but then they go to Army. Win one of those games. The UConn Huskies, listen, like I know I like to joke about them because I'm from Connecticut. I love UConn, but they've been like an utter laughingstock my entire life, basically. At least in my older half of my life. But shout out Jim Moore, shout out the Huskies. Anyways, my best bet: Oklahoma State -2.5 at Kansas. They're not losing back-to-back games. They're not. They got absolutely embarrassed last week. They're going to be playing pissed off. Gundy's got those guys running. I guarantee their practices suck this week. Kansas, without their starting quarterback, isn't the same as Kansas a couple of weeks ago, which sucked my Jayhawks. And even if they don't dominate the Jayhawks, or I think they do, you're telling me I only need a field goal here. I'll take that any day of the week, even if I lose. I still like the bet. I've already locked it in. That's how confident I am because I don't want the line moving later in the week. Give me the Cowboys -2.5. Still have a chance to make the Big 12 title game as that number 2 team. So there's still a lot left on the table for Oklahoma State, even though they have another soul-sucking loss.
How about if we get a 6-6 UConn versus 6-6 Kansas in a bowl game?
I think we'd have to go.
No matter time, location.
I think we'd have to go.
You have to look that up if there's a because I know usually for the bowl games it's like it'll be like Big 12, Big 10. Do you know what the rule is for like the independents?
Normally they'd get at-larges, but I guarantee you there will be like, oh, there's an extra like a 6-6 Missouri. You know what I mean? Or like that. And what they did last year for the bowl games, there were 2 extra bowl teams, and they just invented a new bowl game so they could have the 2 teams play. Like,
yeah, well, there was a bunch of the bowl games got canceled because COVID again.
Yeah, I would love to see like UConn play like New Mexico State, something like that. Something like so stupid, like UConn versus like a 6-6 Cal Berkeley. I would love it.
All right, upset special time. I'm gonna take Kansas State money line here +120 over Texas. It's pretty just simple to me. I think Kansas State's a better football team. They're at home. And Will Howard, shout out Downingtown West, I believe it was. He's a Chestmont League kid. Showed the type of talent that he is last week. 48 points on Oklahoma State. They're better up front in the trenches as well. Kansas State's very good up front. Texas, I don't think, is there yet. I just like Kansas State to win this game. I think they're a good football team. They're at home. Got them at plus money. I think it's a good pick here.
Yeah, cool. I actually will say I agree with you on that one. I think Kansas State might end up winning the Big 12. Like we might just look back at that TCU game like, hey, if they don't blow that lead, they could have won out and with only one loss to a top 25 team in Tulane, been at least talked about for a 4th spot in the playoffs. They wouldn't have gotten in with that loss. But anyways, I am going with Miami at home against Florida State. They are +240 on the money line, +7.5 on the spread at the beginning of the show. Could move by the time the weekend hits. But kind of like I was saying, it just goes to show you how even when both of these teams suck, they're still the 7:30 ABC game after all the other big games today. They're going to be on primetime college football. I believe Kirk Herbstreit and like the main crew are going to be on the call for the game. And I just think Cristobal is a better coach. I mean, it's no offense to my State. I just think Cristobal, as bad as this season has been, he's still recruiting. He's still getting big recruits. Unlike Florida, where you're kind of starting to see some recruits leave. Miami's keeping it together. Cristobal is building a culture there. I think the Hurricanes, after an embarrassing win, 14-12, where I think they had 4 field goals and a game-winning 2-point conversion, in 4 overtimes, by the way, let me mention, over Virginia. I think they're going to get this win, beat their rivals, and still have something to hang their hat on at the end of the season.
All right. Before we head out, don't even know if our show will be up, but just to be on the record, what is your top four for the playoff as of right now?
My top four, if the playoff started right this instant, it would be Georgia number one. Have to still respect that. Tennessee, I would have as number two. I would have Ohio State as number three, and I would have Clemson at number four right now. The first two out, I would have Michigan and TCU.
Okay. My top four would be Tennessee 1, Georgia 2, Ohio State 3, and I think TCU 4. They've just found ways week after week to win some of these chaotic games. I think they're going to have a slip up eventually. I don't see them being in the playoff when it's all said and done, but I think you had to put them in there right now. And then I put Michigan at 5 and Clemson at 6. But that'll do it for week 10. Look forward to getting back, recapping this week's games next week, and then diving into another big slate next week. Any last second things before we head out, Joseph?
Best time of the year. We're in, playoff season starting, and you got all the playoff rankings coming out tonight. Like you said, college basketball starts Monday. It's going to be a sprint. We're going to blink, and all of a sudden we're going to be doing our playoff preview show. So I can't wait.
All right, we will talk next week.